Johnversations Podcast. This is episode 21. I cannot believe we made it. We are in the 20s now. My guest today, I always say this, but I'm uber excited. This is somebody I've been following for a very long time. He is a singer, songwriter, artist, teacher. Not only that, but he and his wife are the owners and founders of the Little Human Art Company, which provides art lessons and music for children. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very, very warm welcome to Mr. Nick Fugedi. Nick, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, not a problem. Like I said, I've been following you. We met, had to be years ago, and it was probably in a bar that I was too young to be in when you were playing. But I've always been a big fan, man. I think you are uber talented. You're a wonderful vocalist. You're a wonderful guitar player, and you write. You have Time Does Fly, which you guys can find on Spotify. I'll put the Spotify link up. But to this day, man, if I'm like cooking or cleaning around the house, I put that on. I've always loved you. I love Rachel Eve. So It's just one of my jams, man. And that trumpet that kicks in is so good. It's just up there as like one of my faves.
Thank you, man.
But I really appreciate you being here. We were talking a little bit before. You've got 3 kids. You've got twins and then a younger one. So let me start by asking you this, man. How has the COVID quarantine and all that been for you at home with the babies?
I would be lying if I didn't say it was tough. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And thankfully, before that, I had been getting into like mindfulness meditation and stuff like that. And I'm so thankful because that helped me. But even with that piece, it just showed the areas of where I needed to work so much more and the areas I needed to let go of, because it was all about being flexible in that moment, right? Like, because our normal lives just got turned upside on their heads. So you go grasping for normalcy, but it's not there and you freak out. And I think everybody went through it in their own ways, and I definitely went through it in mine. But we made it through the other side, and we're not to the other side, but I feel like I've come to this other side where I don't know, I'm in a better place to deal with what's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Like, fortunately enough, with my day job, I've been working from home for like 3+ years now. So like the working from home part wasn't really hard, but I think and I don't know if you ran into anything like this, but like, I love my wife. I love my kid, you know what I mean? But without kind of that opportunity to kind of like step outside, you know what I mean? And be like, oh, well, like, we're going to go do this. Like, you're right. Like your whole normal routine or what you may do for fun gets kind of thrown out the window. And it's just, I don't think people really were prepared for like, oh, it's going to be a challenge to be with these people that I love. You know what I mean? And I will say, I've said this before on the show, but like, I'm lucky enough to have a wife who is just amazing. And like very, very fortunate that we get along very well and we work very well as a team. But I was talking about before, and it's like, man, I can't imagine. There's people out there that were like getting ready to sign divorce papers, and then they were like, "You're not going anywhere, buddy. Like, better either work it out or stay on separate sides of the house." Did you have like any unexpected challenges or anything? Was there anything that stuck out to you that you thought like, "Oh man, I didn't think this would be an issue," but then like you're like in the moment, you're like, "Oh, I just wasn't prepared for this at all."
Oh yeah, for one, before this happened, I was working 5 different jobs at the same time to support, because my wife was staying home with the kids full time. So that was like a huge, I was constantly gone working. So, COVID hits and everything just stopped. All my gigs, all my Little Human stuff that we had on the books. And it went to a halt. And then not only that, but your role reversal changes. Now my wife, who was used to being stay-at-home mom where she ruled the roost, now all of a sudden I'm there, and we're both working from home. So I'm a teacher, so I'm doing my online curriculum, and she's a therapist, so she's doing teletherapy. And so we have our office upstairs, and you got the kids' duties. So it was just crazy, but
Yeah, I'm sure for your wife it was probably like, "Hey, buddy, like you're on foreign soil right now.
Oh
Like
yeah,
this is
I'm the boss here.
right." Did you find, because even my daughter's 18 months, and even at how her age now, she's very good at like she'll go ask mom something.
Oh yeah,
When I'm home, she'll come home and be like, iPad, or because the kid can work an iPad like it's like she's a
yeah,
NASA scientist. It's ridiculous.
yeah.
Like, did you find with you being home normally now that like does that happen a little bit more than maybe it used to or anything like that?
Oh yeah, and then see that's so. There's all the crazy thing about what happened was there was all these moments of like I found myself in like extreme highs where like things are great. Actually, COVID's not that bad. I get to be home with my family, and then all of a sudden like I'd be like down in the dumps where it was like, oh my God, this is terrible. We can't go anywhere. We can't get a babysitter. We're stuck. You freak out, and so it was all about like those ups and down moments. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I've had that, and I've also had like the we're right outside of Nashville, so our case is
okay,
in Michigan. It's cool because my whole family still lives up there, so I get to see, and it's like, oh, like watching the governor be an ace and then see everything start to drop. And even now, I understand up there that she's like closing down bars again because things are moving in the wrong direction, but like you guys had that dip of where it's like, hey, we're like like beating this thing, and
right.
here in Tennessee it's just been climbing. We haven't had that. So like I've had the anxiety of like I can't go anywhere, I can't do my normal life or things that I would do for fun. And then on top of that, I've had the like, oh well, we're definitely gonna get it. Like I'm gonna get it, my wife's gonna get it, I'm gonna be in a hospital having to FaceTime her because she's not gonna be able to come here. It's like the only time in my life. I'm usually a pretty like laid back, like chill person, and this is the only time in my life that I've ever had like an intense anxiety. So that's been new for me to be like, well, I got to figure out like how I'm gonna like work through this. So like I'm not allowed to look at my phone the last 2 hours like before I go to bed so I can sleep.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like trying to like limit myself, or else I'll just be like, okay, what are the numbers here and how many people? And then I start looking into like age groups. Well, it's like men between 30 and 45 here are getting it worse, and like that's my age range, and so it's, I don't know, it's definitely crazy. And I will say one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed about following you online, because again, I've always thought that you were insanely talented, but
thanks, man.
You started doing online, or not online, I'm sorry. You started doing concerts on your front porch, like for your neighbors, it seemed like. And I was cleaning the house one day home with a kid and I just put it on. Like that was my background music. And I was like, this is awesome. Like this is like, so I want to talk about that a little bit, but before we get into that, I mean, I met you when we were teenagers, you know what I mean? So I kind of want to know, like, when for you was it that you kind of found that passion for music? Is it something that you like have had since you were a kid, or was there, I know for some people it's like I heard this record and then I wanted to, I heard like a punk band and was like, I want a guitar, I want to learn 4 chords, and like that's all I want to do.
Oh, yeah.
So did you have anything like that, or was it just kind of like instilled in you?
Oh, I mean, so many moments like that. I mean, it was instilled in me. I come from a musical family. My dad played guitar. He was into Sinatra. So my first concert was actually Tony Bennett at Pine Knob, and then my second concert was John Denver at the Fox. And actually right after that, he is in 94, his plane went down. So I remember that concert. It had a huge effect on me. But yeah, from a young age, listening to my dad's records and stuff. And I remember actually like being really young. This is so weird. But I put on a Jim Croce record. I love Jim Croce. And I remember I grew up in a very religious family, and I go, well, if you can pray to God, you can pray to Jim Croce, right? So, and so I remember I was like, dear Jim, if you get this, man, I want to learn to be able to play guitar and sing and write songs like you. So if you're hearing this, just if you can help me make that happen, And then I'm not saying Jim Croce came down with divine order, but it was
like, operator. I'm gonna place this call. Boop, just touch on the forehead.
Yeah, but that's it sort of started with that, and then writing like songs, and then then I remember same with me. Punk music was a total entry into songwriting because all you needed to know was GCD power chords, and boom, you had a heartthrob teenage angst song you could sing with your buddies in the basement, and it didn't matter if it sounded bad because it all, at the time, you thought it sounded great, but it's like, I look back at old videos and I found, it's just so funny looking at some of that old stuff, but yeah, those are my roots, you know, and then, you know, and then you go through this phase where you're like, oh man, I'm going to be an original artist and I'll never, you know, play music in the bars, like in the corner or whatever. And you sort of set your own ideal of what success is going to be for you. And then life comes and it quickly shows you that you don't know what you're talking about. And, you know, like,
110%.
You need to rearrange your expectations because they're ludicrous, you know. And so my whole life, you know, since then has been checks and balances and like, and I feel like I've gotten to the point where it's like I have no expectations now, which is a great place to be because then it's like anything that happens is like, oh, that's great. I wasn't expecting that, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And you know, kind of following your music and stuff like that, it to me that makes a lot of sense because and I mean this in like the most complimentary way, but like listening to your music and even like when we were younger and like coming to shows and seeing you play, you have always your music to me has always been representative of someone who has like an old soul. You know what I mean? And so like hearing that you were like, yeah, you know, my first concert was Tony Bennett and like I, you know, listened to John Denver and Jim Croce, like that makes a lot of sense because now like, you know, thinking about some of the stuff that I've heard from you and I was like, oh, like that lines up. Like my dad was, you know, we always had music in my house. My mom was really into, I don't know if you remember, but it was 99.5 Young Country. So it was like Garth Brooks and Clint Black and you know, just Alan Jackson in every country. And then my dad was like an 80s, like synth kid. So he liked like the Eagles. He liked Journey. He liked, my first concert, I think, was the B-52s and the Pretenders, which was pretty cool. And then I went and saw Weird Al, I think, after that, which was pretty interesting. And I will say, if you ever have a chance to see him, go see him. Because like take the kids, because he does all of the outfit changes. Like it's one of the craziest. I mean, being an adult now, I don't think I'm as into it as I was when I was a kid, but like it's definitely like an experience. So
there's a reason he's still around, you know?
Yeah. And like the cool thing about him is his band is awesome. Like if you just cut if you cut the lyrics out and you play the song side by side, you're like, oh, it's like you're playing me the same recording. They're so good at being like, I'm going to get this sound down exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, so because I know that you said like you got to the point where, and I think anyone who has like played music or has wanted to do it professionally has been there, you know, where it's like you go from being like, yeah, I'm going to play all originals and like, I'm going to get this record deal and people are going to come out to like see me play my songs because like, you know, and then I think as you get older and especially when it's time to be like, oh man, I got bills to pay. You're like, oh, I'm just going to play stuff that people want to listen to. And I had a guest on 2 weeks ago. Her name was Morgan Hare. She's a professional singer. And that was her thing. She was like, you know, you just got to throw stuff against the wall until it sticks. So if that means like you're writing your originals and doing your original shows, but then you're playing bar shows like 3-4 nights a week, you know what I mean? Like, I think especially now, like the idea of like what being like a working musician is a lot different than what people like may think it is when they start or like if you tell somebody like, hey, yeah, I'm a professional musician, you know what I mean? They're probably not like, oh, well, like what bars do you play? You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool. Let me ask you this, like, you know, being someone, I played a lot of bars for a long time too. Like I know that there was always things about it that stuck out to me. Like, what is your favorite thing about getting in front of those people? Because I know like you just recently got to go out and like play again, right? I think it was like last Friday or something like that. Yeah. So like, what was that feeling like? Because as somebody who is out there doing it all the time, I'm sure that you were just like, get me out of this house. Like, get me out of this house. I want to like play. Yeah.
And you know, there's a different feel of the audience too. Like that's always my favorite part about it is, you know, you never know what the audience is going to be like. So you sort of have to read the audience and sort of think of what songs they're going to like, and, as of late, people are just excited to be out. And so the reaction I've been getting is a lot of people are very positive and a lot of good feedback, stuff like that. So it's been good.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. It's, I'm sure people are just glad to be like, I don't know. I'm a coward, bro. Cause I'm not going to a restaurant until like January 1 of next year. I'll get takeout. Like, but when I saw it, I was like, man, you are a soldier for music, dude. Cause
I'm not doing indoors. I'm only going outdoors.
Okay.
Patios and stuff like that.
That's better. Yeah. I mean, I can't, like, there was some dude here in Tennessee, some country singer who just had I don't know who he is. I saw his name and I was like, I probably don't listen to you for a reason. And not that I have anything against country, but I was like, you know how like sometimes you see people and you make you try not to, but you make assumptions.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that I'm not going to be a fan of these, but yeah, he did some indoor show here, dude, and it was like packed with people. And it's like, bro, like, what are you? And they're like, well, we limited our capacity and we were giving people temperature checks and there was hand sanitizer. It's like, it doesn't matter if everyone is, face to face, like nose to nose. So, I mean, was it weird? Like when you showed up, were you like,
it is weird. It does nothing. It's just weird how nothing feels the same. It's just like now there's this, because I walked up and immediately they checked my temperature and like that's not normal. That we never did that before.
Right.
And, everybody's keeping a distance, but it's like again, we cannot. You gotta like stay fluid in this stuff and roll with it. And yeah, it's not gonna be like how it was. At least not right now. But
yeah, not for a while at least.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and I think that's good, man. I think you have a really good point in like the fluidity and having to be adaptable. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's where I've had some of the hard time is like, I try to do some of like the social distancing stuff with the family, but in my head, I'm like, you're too close, like back up, take a couple steps back. Like I love you and I want to hug you more than anything, but like you're too in my space right now.
Right.
But it's just like, this is a time where it just doesn't seem like anything is, at least for a while, it doesn't seem like that normal that we're used to is going to be back. You know what I mean? Like when you were playing, were there people wearing masks and stuff, or was it like, because I also had that thought. I was wondering, like, if I went out and like played a show right now and went somewhere and I looked out and everybody was just wearing a mask, like, this is like, you can't tell if they're like smiling or like engaged with what you're doing. It's all eyes. So I was like, I mean, like that would be weird for me. Was there a lot of people wearing masks, or was it just kind of like,
I mean, they walk in, but they got to eat, right? So they got to pull it down to eat,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's cool that you're out there doing it, man. It's as much of it is kind of like a release or therapeutic for you to be back at it. I'm sure that like having that some sense of normalcy for anyone who's coming to watch it is like, I mean, I could imagine you could equate it to like a religious experience. Just be like, I'm sitting in this, because for music, for a lot of people, music is like that religion that like, going to shows is kind of like that house of worship, stuff like that. So I can imagine that, just being like to sit down and have that like drink in front of you and there's someone singing a song that you love. You're just like, oh, like I'm like Zen, you know what I mean? And if you don't have that for months and months and months on end, like I don't know what that could do to a person's soul, you know what I mean? So it's,
oh yeah, man. Like this last one, I teamed up with a friend of mine, Jenna. She's a great female singer. And that felt so good to be like, the last time we sang together was 4 months prior, and to just get right back into it. Like you're riding a bike and to like lock into those harmonies. You get the, when you lock in with a duet singer, you get that sort of feeling that, I don't know, it's hard to explain, it's like a flow, and that felt good,
Well, yeah, and
people in the audience catch on to that, they get it. So.
Yeah, and I will say her harmonies are. I've watched the video because you posted a video of that on the Facebook page, and she is. I'm like I grew up listening to like Boys to Men. I like R&B and stuff like that. So like dissecting the harmonies has always been a big thing for me. Like, you're like, okay, where's this, and then this one goes like how much higher than that one. So watching that. And you're right. I think it's very much like even if you can like hit the notes, if you don't have that connection or that like synergy with that person, it doesn't have that same feel as just like watching two people who are kind of melding, like vibing off each other. And when you watch that video, you can tell that like both of you guys are very happy to like kind of be back in your element. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I did want to ask you this. So you're a teacher, right? You're an art teacher, right?
Yeah.
So, again, man, and I feel like I'm just doting on you this whole episode, but like I've seen a lot of the drawings that you've commissioned. You know, you post a lot of those, and they're awesome. Like when did like is that been something like again since you were a little kid, or did you find that as a passion kind of as you grew? Or like my dad was very artistic, and I got a little bit of it from him, but like he had it when he was young, and then as he's gotten older, he's kind of like abandoned it. So I didn't know if it was like something that like you grew up doing and just kind of took it to the next level with the commissions and stuff like that, or was it something that you were like just got turned on to one day?
No, yeah, art actually came before music for me. I was really into art, and my mom is artistic, and I was never allowed to have a coloring. I mean, it's not that I wasn't allowed to have a coloring book. We just didn't have them. And she would, because she thought it would stifle my creativity. So she would always carry blank sheets of paper, and then I would just draw. And I have half brothers, but they're quite a bit older than me. So I sort of raised like a only child. So there's a lot of downtime. So I drew a lot. And yeah, and it was just something that I always just did along with music. And, you know, growing up, I always struggled academically, so I definitely gravitated towards a lot of my energy went to the art music growing up. And now it's funny that I'm still doing the art music, but like my focus now is a lot in like, well, I'm a teacher, so like I've sort of flipped. Now I'm like more into education, and now I'm at a point where art music, it's like I'm still learning, but you know, more in autopilot, you know, taking on commissions or playing shows and stuff like that. But I'm thankful that I was cultivating this stuff from a young age, because it's come to a point where I need to use it.
Right.
I'm thankful that especially with the birth of my twins, we weren't seeing that. We did not see that coming. And so my wife was a social worker, and so we decided that, you know, she would need to stay home and watch the kids, but that was going to be one less huge income, like half. And so I had to make that up somehow. So I just took everything I had and just started making, you know, money with it.
Well, and that's great. My wife is a social worker as well, actually. Awesome. So I think that's very, we were talking before the podcast, but we almost wore the same shirt, and then, then we have wives in similar professions. So that's very cool. But yeah, man, I mean, I will say, I think that's one thing that I have really like respected about you and found myself being, you know, because I still like, I write songs and stuff like that, but I record them and I've just got them for me. You know, my whole thing with that is like, you know, maybe if I kick the bucket one day, my daughter will be able to put them on and kind of get a sense of who I was, or like the stuff that I like to do, things like that. Kind of like with this podcast, it's like, you know, I've got 21 episodes now where if heaven forbid I got hit by a bus tomorrow when she's 18, she could be like, oh, like I can hear my dad have these conversations and kind of get a sense of like what kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
But someone like you, it's really admirable to, and frankly inspiring to say like, hey, look, I've got all of these creative outlets, right? I write, I sing, I do art, and then not to, because I think a lot of people would be very much like, now I got twins, man, it's time to get that second, like I'm going to teach all day and then I'm going to go, you know, work the drive through at McDonald's at night because I got it. But you have these set of skills like a Liam Neeson movie where you can then be like, no, like I'm gonna take care of my family and in a way that like I'm passionate about, or like I have a fire for. Because I imagine like even being an art teacher, even though it's, you know, it's a normal, I don't want to say 9 to 5 because I know that teachers work, I mean, way crazy hours than that, and you're investing on weekends and stuff like that. But like in the terms of like a day job, I mean, that's not a day job you can have if you're not passionate about working with kids and and fostering that creativity. So, I mean, I just, it's respect, man. Cause I'd like, I mean, that's a hard ass hustle game. You know what I mean?
It is. And there's times where I don't have the energy to do it. I think, it creative energy comes and ebbs, peaks and valleys. And so when it comes in a peak, I take full advantage of it. I just I ride that wave and I do as much as I can. And then when I'm in a valley, I rest, and because I know I got to rest, because I found like that creative energy. First of all, the energy that you give to your child and what created your energy was a creative energy to begin with. It's like the peak of all creative energy.
Right.
It's your masterpiece. It's like you can't top that. So yeah, there's a huge, like, I am not as productive as I was before kids, but I just feel like I don't want to lose that. And in a lot of ways it's coming really in the nick of time, no pun intended, but to really help us out of some difficult times, so it's been good.
Yeah, man. It's I mean, I think you're right too. And especially, like I said, man, I've got one kid, and there's some days where I'm just like, my wife and we had talked about maybe having a second one, and then the pandemic happened, and we're just like, I don't know. I'm going to be 36 in February, and I don't want, like, my whole thing is I didn't want to be 40 and have like, hey, here's your 1-year-old. So when you're 20, or when the kid's 20, you're 60, and like he's having to wheel you around places, you know what I mean? So, unless something changes in the next year or so, I think we're sticking with just the one. But like I say all the time, I'm like, man, I'm just so happy that we have a cute kid. Because if my kid was ugly, I don't know if I would have the patience.
Yes, it's possible though. Even ugly, like, the parents who will even love their ugly, because their child's cute.
Well, that's the thing, is that then I'm like, well, maybe my kid, and my kid is adorable, but like, I'm like, oh, every parent thinks like that, even if everyone else is like, damn, that's an ugly baby. They're like, no, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
I was an ugly baby. I look back at my old,
oh, dude, my head has always been this size. So my poor mom, man. So, and like, you were talking about like your parent, like you grew up in like that artistic environment. My mom, she really liked, I mean, speaking of like Jim Croce and John Denver, she played guitar and was really into like 60s folk and all that stuff. And when I was like 2 years old, she got in a 12-string Martin from, it must have been like had to be like either between like 1965 and like 1975, because she like, it was old when she got it, and she got it as a graduation gift. And I was like 2, and I jumped up on the bed and went right through the back of it, destroyed it. And she hasn't owned another guitar since. So
good going.
Dude, well, you're right. What a dick. But no, that's one of my goals is, at some point I'm going to replace that. That's like, get her that same one. But
you're doing, man.
Yeah. I don't know if she'd even like want to try to play at it now, but like, it's, I don't know. It's just crazy. And like, again, like with your mom being like, no coloring books. Like you can create something on your own that's better than, any coloring book that you may have now. So it's again, kind of watching you, seeing what you're doing, sitting down, having this conversation with you makes all the more sense, because it's like, oh, like you've just been free creatively to be like, figure it out, do what you want, like have a good time with it. So let me ask you this, like how has the teaching been for you? Because I know like right now, obviously you're not back in school or anything like that, but like, are you like essentially doing like art classes, like virtually or and things like that? Or is it, I mean, like with like your normal students and stuff, or?
Yeah, we had to finish out the whole year virtual. So I teach ceramics, so it's sort of hard to do virtually. So I had to totally switch the curriculum to like art history, and then, have them make projects with what they had at home. So like the first project was recycled art sculpture. And so like whatever you have at the house, make some kind of sculpture, sketch it out, document it, take pictures of it, send it in to me. And I was blown away by what these kids, they must have been really bored or really into the project, one or the other. But whatever, they created really great pieces. So it's, we bend with it, we flow with it and make the best of it. But teaching for me has been awesome. It's sort of kept me young. It's kept me, I've learned so much about how to have difficult conversations with young people. A lot of times, because I teach at a very conservative school, I consider myself pretty liberal. But so some of the, I've had to learn to have difficult conversations calmly when a kid obviously is getting quite upset and passionate, but it's been good. It's one of those crazy things where you end up, even though you're the teacher, you're learning so much more. You feel like than you are teaching. I hate to say that, but you're grown quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I feel like they make so many of those like movies where the teacher learn, you know what I mean? There's so many movies with that storyline that there's got to be some like truth to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you go into the school, you meet these kids and you're there to change them, but they change you. You know what I mean? But let me ask, like, how old are the kids that you have in your class?
I'm teaching high school. So I'm teaching.
Oh, dude, bless you. Bless you all day. Yeah. Like,
actually, I don't know. For some reason, I can talk to high schoolers very easy. Well, I teach at Catholic Central, my old school. So I'm familiar with, just that school. And, I don't know. I really enjoy it. I taught middle school. That is not for me. I do enjoy teaching elementary. That's part of the reason why my wife and I started that Little Humans art company. But I like to have sort of a balance. So,
yeah, I would imagine high school's probably got to be a little bit easier because you're getting out of like that, like, crazy hormone rage, like that, like 7th, 8th grade, and like hopefully by like 9th, 10th grade you're kind of pushing out of that. But like I can imagine, like especially in the middle school age, just like every kid just being a little ball of emotion. You know what I mean? I was a crier when I was a kid. Everything I was just like, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? So I can imagine being in that age group. There's a lot of that. Like, so let me ask you this. I mean, like, do you feel I have, like, it's crazy. So I have some brother-in-laws, like one of my brother-in-laws is 15 years old. So it's crazy to be like, yeah, this is my brother-in-law. You know what I mean? But like, and he listens to the show. So no, if you're listening, what up? But, like, I know like from being with him and like having, conversations with him and stuff like that, I feel like there are times where I have my my finger on the pulse of like that age group, maybe a little bit better than like some other people my age do. Like, do you have that same feeling like when they come in talking about like Meg the Stallion and all like the TikTok dances and stuff like that? Like, is it like, like, are you able to catch on pretty quick to what they're talking about?
Regretfully, yeah, sometimes. Some of that stuff, it's like, why? I just wish I didn't hear it. But for the most part, my guys are like, I'm blessed to teach the students that I teach. And it's.
Oh, yeah, because Catholic Catholic Central is it all boys?
All boys, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's got to be a little bit easier.
Yeah, it is. And it's, they're upperclassmen, so they're at that age where they're like excited about the future. And so I like to have those talks with them about like, I don't know, what's important to know before you go off to college. What should you, don't get a credit card. Don't take too much student debt on, those kind of, and the cool thing about teaching art is that it's an open forum class. So there's a lot of communication going on about, my students joke around that my class should be called philosophy and sometimes a little bit of ceramics.
That's awesome though, man. Because like my favorite teacher, one of my favorite teachers that I ever had, his name was Mr. Cifaldi, Matthew Cifaldi.
Yeah.
And he taught photo, but for him, it was like a Dow and photo class. And so I remember like one of the first times we had this class, I show up and he's reading this. He's like, he writes short stories all the time. So he was reading the story about a guy who dressed like completely normal suit and tie, but under his shirt, he wore a woman's bra. And like, it was just this thing. And it was kind of talking about like, how the whole point of the story is like, you don't want to judge this person because of the fact that, they have this inclination to do something that maybe like you don't agree with. And so he finished the story and he was like, so like, what do you guys think? Is this like something weird? And everybody's like, yeah, man, it's like a grown man wearing a woman's bra. And he said, you just wait until I'm tenured. Because when I'm tenured, I'm going to move my shirt and show a little, walking here with a bra strap on. But he was that saying like, hey, how can you take big ideas, right? Like, you know, taking photos or you know, sculpting and ceramics isn't just, you know, sit down and mold the clay and throw it in. Like, you can have big ideas and philosophy that goes into that kind of makes those pieces something much, much bigger than like, here's an ashtray I made for you for Father's Day. You know what I mean? So that's
cool. I do that all, you know, half of my class is me saying that, going, all right, guys, here's another example of how ceramics and life diverge. And I'll give some lesson or whatever.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's got to be pretty cool too, like with them. Cause you know, I can imagine like if you're like a science teacher or a history teacher, it's even in like an all boy or all girl school, you've probably got those kids that there's probably those kids, and I just knew them in high school, but that, you know, they wanted to like argue, you know what I mean? But I and maybe I'm wrong, but I can kind of imagine like if you're in an elective like ceramics or something like that, it seems like most of the kids would probably have an interest or something like drew them to that. So I'm sure you don't get like the same. I can't imagine in that class there being a lot of people that are like causing trouble or making scenes, stuff like that.
I have very little problems. Yeah, because even the kids that are quote unquote problems for other teachers in my class are great, because usually those kids are kids that maybe have ADHD or they have trouble concentrating or they just don't learn in a classroom setting. But my room is not a classroom, it's a studio, and they come in and they, you know, they're hands on and they're talking with their buddies and they're listening to music and they're creating something. And yeah, it's usually a lot of the kids that take the class, it's their favorite time of the day, which is an honor for me to think that when they look back on their high school experience, my class was one of their favorite classes to go to. And so, you know, it's like, keep that in mind. And yeah, so we talk a lot about a lot of different topics and keep it light, you know.
That's all. Let me ask you this. Like, do you think, I'm like you, where I had a hard time with academics in high school, because all I wanted to do is, if I had homework, I didn't care about that homework. I had, you know, I was in a 3-piece punk band. So like it's like homework will get done whenever I feel like doing it. But like now I'm going to go and I'm going to play music all day. Like I would ride the bus or get a ride home with them. And then literally until the time we got off school to like 9:00 at night, like we'd be like, let's like work on this song or write this, like, let's figure out this part. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where, you know, with something like you teach, like you said, it's a studio, right? Where they can come in, they can be creative. Like, do you have any thoughts, or is there, I've always kind of equated school, at least the way that we know it, as almost like prepping for like a factory. You know what I mean? Like you go to class, you work till the bell rings, that bell rings, you got your like 5-10 minute break to get to the next class. You work till the bell rings, etc. Like, do you think that there's any chance, or like, would you like to see more of that moving towards like kind of like the expressive, like kind of hands-on, just like a change in the way that we do it? I mean, what, like being a teacher and being in that situation, like what do you think the benefit would be to that, if there is any?
Oh, without a doubt. In fact, what you just touched on is a video that I showed every one of my students. It's by Alan Watts, and I think it's called You Were Supposed to Dance or something like that. And there's like an illustration that goes along with it. But in it, it talks about how school is structured as a factory. I have students all the time that say, you know, this is dumb. Why do we need to learn this, blah, blah. And I tell them, you know, do you need to know calculus for what you're going to do in the future? No. But what they're trying to get you to be able to do is to learn complex things and be able to regurgitate them, so that when you go out and get a job, they can teach you a skill set, and then you can sit and do it. I mean, it sounds like a very awful way to say it, but that's the macro view of education, right?
Yeah, let me teach you to do it, and then you prove to me that you've learned the skill, whether, you know, doesn't matter what the skill is.
Right, and that's creating people into robots. And the great thing about art and music is that it does the opposite of that. and it breaks the boxes and the boundaries and all that stuff. And so, yeah, when I look at education, I feel very sad because I'm like you. I struggled academically. All throughout my middle school, high school years, I struggled. Had to have tutors, and it wasn't until college that I think it was just the setup of college, and I don't know if it was more. I was more further along in my studies, maybe more mature to make the connection. Because in high school, you don't make the connection. You're like, this is dumb. I don't want to learn this,
Right.
So, but when you're in college, you're studying something that you want to do, so you're a little bit more motivated to do it. But yeah, I wish education and schools would to cater to, because like people like you and I, it's that creative, that really was a lost opportunity. Like it would be nice if they could take a student like how we were, and how do you incorporate that into education? Well, obviously this kid enjoys creating things, and that's how he learns. He's not going to learn it from lectures and regurgitating it, but it's that would take a lot. That would take more teachers, more money, and more time to do that. So they can't.
Well, yeah, I mean, my mom, I've talked about this on the show before, but my mom is a parapro. So she works with kids with autism and stuff like that. And, I know for her, that's a lot of what she says is that, like, if you can give these kids, especially with the age group that she has, because she's in like elementary, but it's like, if you give them like a hands-on thing, she had a kid that like any video game that you put in front of him, he'd beat it in 20 minutes. He was like, done. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because like he understands how that works, but going to choir and hearing everybody sing, he's like, no, this isn't for me. Like, get me out of here right now. So it's like, it feels like if we could have a more, I know for me, I would have loved like if I could have gone to, like, we had guitar class and piano class, but it was like, here, learn these scales, and it was like a blow off. It was like a blow off class. You know,
they got to give it to every kid. So it's designed for the masses. But if it could be more, designed for a student of that type, then you could really explore it and do cool things instead of just playing these songs that nobody wants to play.
Oh yeah, I did a rap medley. I learned G, C, D, and A chords on the piano, and that because I took piano and guitar. And so for my final project, I did the same rap medley in each class, but I did one on guitar and then one on piano. And I was just like, I learned them teach. So, but I had that class. Shout out to Jason McGlone. I had that class with him, and like we used to just we go in like the practice rooms and we turn off the lights and like take a nap. It was like nobody. It was just like, oh, this is the class you're taking. You can play guitar if you want to, or play piano if you want to, and it was just an easy like hour to kill out of our day. You know what I mean? It was like extra lunch break, But I think if there was somebody there that was like, okay, like you like playing guitar, you like singing, let's work on songwriting. Like let's look at strong songwriting structure. Hey, let's say you want to put out your own album. Like, do you know how to become an LLC, or do you know what I mean? Do you know how, especially now, like, do you know how to copyright and own the rights to your music? And then how do you distribute to like Spotify and stuff like that? So I feel like there is definitely, and whether it's music or if it's, a kid who's into art, drawing or, ceramics or whatever, it's just like, sometimes it just feels like we have a better way that we could be doing it. And I think you're right. I think teachers definitely need to be paid more. Let me ask you this. Do you think that that's going to change after COVID? Because like I was kind of wondering, like all these parents are home now, right? And they're like, well, teachers don't work. They get the summers off. They don't work that hard. And now like you're responsible. Like if my kid was like 7, I would have blew my brains out. Like I wouldn't there's no way I could handle like being like, she'd be the dumbest kid in the school if I was like, let me teach you the curriculum. So like, do you think now after all this, when schools kind of come back, do you think there's going to be a shift there, or teachers are going to be seen as more valuable?
That's a really good question. Yes and no. I think people have always known the value of teachers. The problem is, I can't even narrow it down to one problem. It's just funding, right? And So there would have to be a huge shift in government policy to shift more money that way. Of course, if there's an influx in money, there's probably going to be an influx in certification, requirements as teachers. So, I mean, you can hope. I hope it does. I really do, because, yeah, it's a tough job, and a lot of people have learned firsthand how hard that job is. And so hopefully there is a shift, and we'll see.
Yeah, man, it's I mean, I feel like especially right now, and that's another thing that I've really respected about you as an artist, and especially, if you're someone who works in a place that tends to be more conservative, and then you're of a liberal mindset, it can, and I'm sure it's like a mixed bag amongst the people that work there, but like, I'm a dude from Michigan living in middle Tennessee. So there's a lot of people that are like, hey man, you're real liberal. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm wondering, because like one of my favorite things, and it's sad that it's one of my favorite, but I think it kind of puts things into perspective. With the George Floyd incident and all the protests and everything. Somebody posted, hey, if you're upset about defunding the police, like look what they've done to our schools. You know what I mean? Just like constantly cutting funding and things like that. And one of the things that I've seen that has been encouraging, and again, one of the reasons I kind of respect, I mean, you're a teacher, a business owner, and you've been on social media. I mean, you've been very outspoken about how you feel about this particular situation. And it's really good to see that, because you see, other companies and stuff that are like, we support protesters, but we're not taking a stance and this and that. And like, you've been very like, hey, here's my line in the sand. Like, this is how I feel about it. Either you like it or you don't. Like, do you think, because something that I was thinking about is like, why not does a police department need to have a tank, or can we take that money and invest that into our school and give our teachers, reasonable salaries and take that money and invest it into, programs where, if a kid wants to start a business, he can go to a free business class. I've talked about it before, but Kevin Hart is working with Chase Bank so that he can go into inner cities and run business classes. But it's like, why does Kevin Hart have to do that? Why is it something that we as a people are saying, like, let's give these people, let's give everybody an opportunity? So, I mean, could you see that changing at all, where like kind of how we invest? Because again, man, I have a problem with like armored vehicles and stuff at like your local police department when we've got 20 kids in a class with 12 desks and 10 books. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think they made a big mistake at calling it defunding the police department, because I think that gives a bad sound. Maybe reallocating funds, demilitarizing. I mean, that's a recent phenomenon up into the 1980s that police started becoming militarized. I mean, so we should take a step. I mean, there's no need for them to have tanks, and they spend a lot of money. And so I think it's not defunding, it's reallocating. And hopefully, I mean, I hope that now they take value in education and the teachers, because I mean, teachers are severely underpaid. I mean, part of the reason why I had to work 5 jobs is because I'm a teacher. Luckily, I was able to do it, but it was tough, working 70 hours a week, trying to support a family of 5. But and I'm not the only one that's had to do that. I work with other teachers that have to do the same thing. So.
Yeah, man. And I agree with you. I definitely don't think defunding the police, and I have friends who are police officers, you know what I mean? So I definitely don't think defunding the police is
because they're underpaid too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, and they're doing everything. It's like, there's a dog loose going after somebody, like, or there's a naked homeless dude, around the circle. So, they
need to be paid more. So that's what I don't like about this term defund the police, because it needs to be reallocated, right? So instead of buying these tanks, you need to pay these guys, well, for one, appropriate training. I don't know. I feel like I'm running for politics now that I'm like, I got a platform here, but
you just got to do the
yeah. They should be trained a little bit better, but they need to be paid for what they're doing. They're putting their lives on the line, and other people do too, but other people get paid better,
Yeah, and I agree, man. And, like, there's a Camden, New Jersey. I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but, Camden, New Jersey, they fired their entire police force and then rehired with higher qualifications and then more training. So they had a smaller force, but they were able to pay them more. And then the money that they saved, they were able to put in the community. So like now you've got cops who are making more money. You've got cops who are actually, encouraged to interact with the community. They've had like nonviolent de-escalation training. And then on top of that, you're putting money into community programs. So you're seeing crime go down by like 60, 70% because, kids are getting an education and there's after school activities and things that they can do to, because to me, it doesn't matter what color you are, man. If you live somewhere where you can't concentrate in school because, there's not the attention given to you, and, you live somewhere where, you don't have opportunities like someone in the suburbs may have, something like that. Like you're going to find a way to be like, hey, I'm going to make some money, or, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you come from someplace where your options are so limited, it's not, when crime goes up, when people join gangs, stuff like that, like it makes sense because you're not giving them any other opportunities. You know what I mean? Like the school to prison pipeline is a very real thing for a reason, so it's, I don't know. It's cool that I think, again, not to like, overly dote on you, but to see someone that takes something like, ceramics and then comes in and says like, no, let's think about this bigger. Right. Like, I think that's exactly what we need is, like, because you're learning a skill, you're learning how to think big about that skill and how to apply, different theories and philosophies to this one thing, but then you can take that skill set and apply that to anything. You know what I mean? So
right.
I don't know. I just think it's awesome what you're doing. So, one thing I did want to ask you about, especially with you being so creative, we mentioned it at the top of the show and a little bit throughout, but you and your wife have started the Little Humans art company. And I really think what you're doing is like a crazy big idea. Cause if I understand correctly, you guys bring like art classes, live music to like two groups of kids, right? So like you're working kind of on site instead of being like, hey, people have to come to us and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, talk to me a little bit about how that started. Cause I think that's a super cool idea. And I think if there was something like that when I was a kid, like that's something I would have really been into. So, walk me through that a little bit.
I would love to take credit for it, but it began with my wife. Again, this sort of came out of us sort of trying to figure out, well, when we moved to Allen Park, we always thought how cool it'd be to have something like what we're doing. And so I think it came out of a void of it not being there. And so we were sitting around one evening, and my wife was looking at, I think there was another studio in California that does something similar. And she like leaned over to me and she's like, you know what, Nick, we should start an art company. And I was like, I didn't really think too much of it because I don't know, there's a lot of businesses that do similar services. And she was like, no, this is, it's called process art. I'm like, well, what's process art? And she's like, it's not about the finished product. It's all about the process of making the art. It's very free. It's very fun. And so I was like, oh, all right. And so she really thought of it and sort of took my skills and sort of put them to the best use within it. So she was sort of the brains behind it, just, figure out how we were going to market it, structure it, what kind of classes we're going to be doing. And then I was more taking that information and then implementing those ideas in these classrooms. And so at first I really struggled with it because I'm an art teacher, right? So I was trained to teach a skill set to kids, right? So you want to draw a tree, here's a tree, I'm going to teach you how to draw this. And so there's a goal and we're going to get to that goal. Well, process art turns that upside on its head. And it says, we're not going to draw a tree. You're going to draw whatever you want. You're going to paint whatever you want. And as an instructor, you have to let go. And I really struggled with that at first because these kids would be like taking the paint and they're mixing and they're making brown. And I'd be like, well, if you mix those colors, it could be brown. And my wife would look at me and be like,
I just imagine you walking by going, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. No. Don't hold the pencil like that. And I would catch myself. And so it wasn't And my wife would give me that look, you gotta let go. You gotta let go. And then, the crazy thing happened, man, is that I realized that in doing these classes, this was like I've done with my ceramics classes, this pertains to life. And so many times we get stuck into this goal set mode, where I remember as a kid, I was like, I'm going to be a rock star, man. That's success. I'm going to be playing music in sold out venues, like this crazy, ridiculous goal. And what happens is you don't even get to enjoy the process of whatever you're doing because you're so worried about that goal. And if you don't hit it, which most likely you won't because it's set so ridiculously high, you're going to be disappointed. And so this art class taught me that, enjoy the process of where you're at right in that moment. Don't even have a goal. Who knows what's going to happen, So to me, that was the most exciting aspect of it. And then on top of it, to see these kids, when you do that, they're natural artists. And, there was the point in all of our lives where we fell short of what we wanted to draw. And I tell all my students, that was the moment you decided whether you were going to be an artist or not. And it happens at a very young age. And then whatever that decision was at a young age, you went the rest of your life thinking, well, I can't draw. Oh, I can't. Because you never progress past, whatever you thought you couldn't draw at that time. And some people, it's a stick figure,
Yeah. You're just like, oh, well, I think that's very right on, where it's like, oh, I set this goal, I fell short of that goal, so obviously this is not what I'm supposed to do, instead of being like, hey, I set this goal, I fell short of this goal, so let me adjust my goal. Maybe I get the head and the body of the stick figure and I work on the legs and the shoes, later, but let me get this first, And
I hear that a lot from people. They're like, oh man, Nick, you're still doing music. That's awesome. The only way it did happen was because I had to readjust what my definition of success was. And to me now, success is that I can actually make a living off of something I love to do that I never thought I could make a living off of music. And I can actually do a drawing and someone's willing to, give me money to do that drawing. And not only that, it brings joy to people's lives. I feel very honored, and so just redefining what success is. So, so to me, there'll never be a window. Like people always say, well, if you haven't made it by 27, you'll never make it in the music business. So it's like, well, that's not what music business I want to be in the first place. Like to me, it's like, I'm just going to do it to the day I die. And they can come to, if anybody wants to come and listen, they can come listen,
Well, and the other thing is too, is that again, I think that's it's like a if you haven't made it by the time you're 27. Sturgill Simpson was 35 working on the Tennessee Railroad and was like, I guess I'm going to put out a record. And then 2 years later, he's, playing these churches from the 1600s in Europe. And if you've got, that's the thing. I think it's more, and again, man, I feel like I'm just I feel like I should have a thing of Crisco because I'm just buttering you up this whole time. But that's the one thing that I've admired about you, is that it seems like you've stayed true to what works for you. And whether that means we're going to see Nick Fugedi at DTE in front of a sold out crowd or, something like that. Or it's we can go see him, go see you playing at the bar and, you're putting food on the table. My wife asks me all the time. She's like, my wife and I, there's 7-year difference between us. So she's always like, what are your goals and aspirations? I'm like, Kara, I'm married. I own my car. I own a house. Mortgage is paid. We have a kid. I've got we have health insurance. I don't know what else, growing up the way that I did, to me, that's I have it. Anything after that is just extra. So if you can, I think you're right, where if you can just say I'm just going to be okay with the situation that I'm in and let things kind of happen. I think, that's the best way to kind of let that joy. And then I on that too, I think you start appreciating beautiful things when they happen instead of ignoring them because you're I have to hit this goal. That's cool. That's nice that happened, but I've still got all of this to do, where, just stop for a minute and be hey, I can really enjoy this. You know what I mean? One of my favorite things that you do is Mr. Nick and Lemonade in the Shade. You gotta shake, wiggle, sound. Like I said, I told you, my daughter is 20 months old, so we've had a few mornings where we've put that on, and she just shakes in the living room and stuff. So it's cool. I don't know if you watch Parks and Recs, but you kind of remind me like Johnny Karate a little bit.
I just started watching it, so I'm not far in. What season is that?
It's towards the end, but Chris Pratt decides that he's going to be like a kid's entertainer, and he goes by Johnny Karate. And so he like teaches them karate and music. He does, plays guitar, sings songs. But I was like, I just thought it was awesome that it's like, when did that come into play? Because I know that you started with, kind of with like the mobile art and stuff like that. But when did Mr. Nick come to fruition?
When I had kids, like I kept leaving to play these gigs at bars, and I was thinking, God, I wish I could do something where I could get my kids involved. And I was like, so I started learning these kids songs for them, and they were, they loved it. And that felt good. It's like a whole nother, as musicians, you just want to feel appreciated, right? You want to feel like what you're doing is, and I tell you, kids, when you're playing music, they will let you know that you're appreciated. They think you want to feel like a rock star, they'll make you feel like a rock star.
Oh, dude, I play a lot of Baby Shark in this house on my guitar.
Oh, yeah. And
if I try to play something else, she goes, she's like, go back to Baby Shark, please. Play the hits.
Yeah. And so that's where it came. It started with my kids. And then doing it in the art class, I saw how much these, we started doing classes with, we had 7-month-old babies in some of these classes, and to see them respond to the music, that was really cool. And then, the pandemic hit. And so we started doing virtual classes every single morning for a platform called Honey. And, that taught me a whole nother skill set. And that was a learning experience. But like people would send me pictures of their babies, like, right up to the screen watching me. And that's super good. It sort of helped me through that dark time,
Well, it's cool too that like during a time when that's what I think I'm most admired about it is that, we're going through a pandemic. And again, it seemed like people were kind of losing their minds a little bit. And so I'm seeing all this, like people are being like, oh, like I can't get a hold of Michigan unemployment. I can't like I've got to go back to work, but like they're not giving us masks, and and all these people, and just this like negativity, and just like a ball of like, I can't control this. You know what I mean? Like for the first time in my life, like there are factors outside that like I like have no control of on like a scale that I couldn't even imagine. So you scroll through that, and then you stumble, you stumble upon like a live video that you're doing, and I put it on, and I'm like, this is just like so damn happy, like literally, like honestly. And I mean, I'm 35 years old, so it's, like I grew up with like Raffi and stuff like that, Baby Beluga and Salty the Psalm Book and all that stuff when I was a kid. So as soon as I clicked it on, I was like just hanging out with my daughter, and that's like, it brought me back. And so to see someone that's like, listen, there's all this crazy stuff going, but how can I find a way to like inject some good? There's like, I don't know, man. I feel like there's not a lot of people like that. You know what I mean? I think that makes me appreciate you on like on a level that is kind of crazy hard to explain, because it was just like, again, just so much like panic and freaking out. And then there's Mr. Nick. You know what I mean? Mr. Nick's like, hey, cool out. Like we're gonna wiggle the wiggles out. Yeah. And I also think it's cool you take the kids with you too. I think that's pretty rad. Do you guys provide lemonade and stuff like that? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a cool thing. And there were times where I didn't feel so happy and calm, and I had to do this, this morning live stream. And so I'd sit for a couple of mornings before I press live and take some deep breaths and be like, all right, well, I'm freaking out, but I can't let the kids see that I'm freaking out. And so you sort of center yourself, and then it was good because it made me check where I was every single morning. So like I always was able to check in. And then by the time I was done with it, I felt happy and good because people were commenting, oh, I love that song. Thank you so much. And so it helped me as much as, people said it helped them. And the other thing too is we were talking about being young and having egos and saying what success is to you. And there's nothing that will kill your ego more than just shaking your sillies out with a bunch of 5-year-olds. It's like that. Just if ever you take yourself too seriously, just do that, and it'll ground you very quickly, and it gets you in a good place.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, like we do at my house, we do we do Baby Shark, we do Itsy Bitsy Spider, and then I've got her into, she likes a little bit of the format. She likes the Foo Fighters. So I'm trying to move her into, it's funny. I'll put on like every once in a while, I'll put on Under Oath. And I was like, all right, show me how you sing. And she holds her hand up like she's holding the microphone. And then she does like the screaming face. She's like screaming the lyrics. So it's just like, it's crazy. And I guess, before I had a kid, like I didn't, just like the way that they kind of soak things in, you know what I mean? Like she has the iPad now and she came out the other day doing like Johnny Finger. And so I just imagine kids that like spend the morning with Mr. Nick and then all day they're like, shake the wiggles out. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I don't know, man. Like I said, it was just really cool because I'm sure for the kids, you know what I mean? Like, especially if you're a kid right now that like you can't see your friend or, you're not going to your like preschool or daycare or something like that. Like I'm sure for the parents it's hard, but then, like I said, man, if my kid was older, I don't know how we would handle it. I feel like we're very lucky that she's so young now that hopefully by the time she gets older, like some of this will kind of have gone back to, some kind of normal, and it won't be something that like she remembers, you know what I mean? Like, not to get heavy, but like I remember, where I was on September 11th because I was old enough where if I would have been, like her age, it's a story that you hear, but you don't have that, like the weight of that memory and remember, you know what I mean? Like in your head to be like, oh, like this is where I was at. So, it only happens every couple hundred years. So I'm just, just like thankful that she's not old enough for it to make a dent on her. But
it is wild to think we are living through a historic moment that we will always remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. That is one thing I wanted to ask you too, because I've been asking, I've had quite a few musicians on lately because, I know up until recently, a lot of people, including yourself, like you make your income. That's your life's, that's your life's blood is from playing shows and stuff like that. So I've been having a lot of artists on, but it really feels like right now we're kind of going through like the next civil rights. Like we're going through a huge part of history. I think in, 30 years, when you look back, it's going to be the next civil rights movement is what we're going through right now. And I've been asking this. I want to get your opinion just because of like your influence and stuff like that. But is there anybody that's, every movement almost has like a soundtrack to it, right? So if you think about the civil rights in the 60s, you had your Dylan, your Arlo Guthrie, your James Brown, like just this whole wave of music that encompassed that time and that movement. Do you think looking back on 30 years, 30 years from now, looking back on today, is there anybody that you think is going to stick out as far as like, oh, this was, part of that soundtrack?
Right now, I don't know. It's, I think it's going to be a window for unknown musicians to rise up. I think it's like I saw something on Instagram, this 12-year-old boy singing a cappella.
Oh, so good. I know exactly what you're talking about. He's just like in his house. His mom's filming him.
I think of that. I think of him. And it's like when I heard that, the hairs on the back of my neck rose up, and it's like it just came from such a raw, real place that I will always think of him to me, and I can't think of his name right now, and I will go find his name, but I hope he sings some more because I loved it.
Yeah, he's Sesame Street and CNN did an episode about like everything that was going on with the protests and stuff, and they had him on. And he was just like, yeah, like I just wanted to, I always like singing, and I just kind of like wanted to get out like how I was feeling. I think I'm pretty sure Obama called him and was like, "Hey man, like great job. That was awesome. Really like your singing. Good job." But yeah, like, and that's the thing too, is that like it's moving, and it's also, I think people are gonna look back and be like, it's heartbreaking that a kid that young, that's what was at the top of his priorities. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. I was talking about this with my friend Marty. He was on last week, and he's a former Marine, and Rodney King happened. We had 1990. So, I mean, we were both old enough to remember like the LA riots and seeing it on TV and stuff like that. And we're like, dude, we're 5. Like we're in our mid 30s now, and we're still seeing the same things. So, I'm just hoping that 30 years from now, when my kid is, 30, that, 32, that like it's we're not seeing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I'm really grateful to you for being a light of positivity and all this, man. It's like I said, there's not a lot of, it's hard right now to find stuff that you're like, oh, this just genuinely makes me feel good. And everything that you're doing, I think is leaning right in that direction. And it's, I don't know, man, it's really cool. I just wanted to have you on because I'm really grateful for everything that you do. And I wanted to ask, if people wanted to find you, I mean, we can put like the links up in the show notes and stuff like that. We're obviously going to link up the Spotify page because that album that you put out is really good. I know it's old, but it's still, I mean, that's the thing, man. Doesn't matter if it's old or not. The songs are still good. And so I want people to make sure they're checking that out. But like, other than that, like, what's the best way for people to find you if they want to check out Little Humans? I mean, what's the best way for them to do that?
All right. You can find Little Humans information at www.littlehumansartco.com. My personal music, Nick Fugedi. That's Fugedi. Facebook, you can find all my stuff on there. And I don't really have a website for all of it, but I'm all on Facebook. So
cool. Yeah, and I'll link that up. And if you don't mind, is it cool if I link up your Instagram page too? Because that's where you put a lot of that's where I've seen a lot of like your art commissions and stuff, and they are very, very cool. So if that's cool with you, I'll throw that in there as well, because I think that's, I mean, some of those pictures you do of you just did one, I think, of an older couple, and I was like, man, this is so good. So I want people to like be able to see that. So if that's cool with you.
Yeah, it's cool with me, man.
Awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it. I know there in Michigan, it's coming up at about 10 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up, but thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Will you stick around for me for a minute after we wrap up?
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week. Episode 21 in the books. Again, big thank you to Nick Fugedi. Check out Little Humans Art Co. We'll get all the links in there. We'll see you next week.